It started with a subtle change. Anthony noticed how Madeline, once warm and engaging, had grown distant. She no longer asked about his day or cared to share hers. Their conversations were reduced to mundane exchanges, and even those felt forced. The change was slow but undeniable. He first dismissed it as work stress. Madeline was juggling a demanding job, after all, but the late-night texts and secretive phone calls didn't escape his attention. One evening, as they sat together in the living room, Madeline's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, a fleeting smile crossing her lips before she tilted the screen away and typed furiously. "Who's that?" Anthony asked casually, trying not to sound suspicious. "Just office stuff," Madeline said without looking up. "At 10 p.m.? He probed further, leaning slightly toward her. She snapped her head up, her tone sharp. "Why do you care? It's not like you'd understand my work anyway." Her words stung, but Anthony brushed it off. He didn't want to fight, but the unease settled deep in his chest. A week later, the feeling intensified. Anthony came home early from work, hoping to surprise her. He found her in their bedroom, speaking softly into her phone. "Yes, I'll meet you tomorrow," she whispered, her back turned to the door. "No, don't worry. He has no clue." Anthony froze in the doorway. "Madeline," he called out, forcing a smile to cover his growing anxiety. She jumped and quickly hung up, her expression shifting into forced nonchalance. "Anthony, you're home early. Why didn't you tell me? Who are you talking to?" he asked, stepping closer. "Just a colleague," she said too quickly, avoiding his eyes. He wanted to press her, but something in her tone warned him to tread carefully. Unable to make sense of the changes, Anthony turned to Tiago, his younger brother, for advice. They met at a small cafe near their office. "You're probably overthinking it," Tiago said, stirring his coffee. His face was calm, reassuring. "Madeline has always been independent. Maybe she's just stressed about work. You know how demanding her field is." Anthony sighed, gripping his cup tightly. "It's more than that, Tiago. She's been distant, secretive. I feel like there's something she's not telling me." Tiago leaned back in his chair, feigning concern. "Maybe you should try surprising her with a getaway. Remind her why she fell in love with you. Women love that kind of thing." Anthony nodded, though the unease lingered. "You're right. Maybe I just need to put in more effort." Tiago's lips curled into a slight smile. "That's the spirit. Don't let small doubts ruin your marriage." What Anthony didn't notice was the flicker of amusement in Tiago's eyes. The following weekend, Anthony decided to surprise Madeline with dinner at her favorite restaurant. He made reservations, bought her flowers, and even left work early to set everything up. But when he came home, Madeline wasn't there. Her car was missing, and her phone went straight to voicemail. He called her colleagues, but none of them knew where she was. Hours later, she walked in, her makeup slightly smudged and her hair messy. She looked startled to see him waiting in the living room. "Where were you?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. "Out with friends," she said, brushing past him. "Which friends?" "Why are you interrogating me, Anthony?" she snapped, dropping her bag on the couch. "Do I need your permission to go out now?" "That's not what I'm saying. I just stop," she interrupted, her voice rising. "You're suffocating me with your constant questions. Maybe if you spent less time worrying and more time improving yourself, I wouldn't feel so disconnected." Her words hit him like a punch to the gut. He watched silently as she stormed off to their bedroom, slamming the door behind her. Over the next few weeks, Anthony tried to salvage their relationship. He took Tiago's advice and planned small surprises, breakfast in bed, thoughtful gifts, even a weekend getaway. But Madeline remained indifferent. Meanwhile, her secretive behavior escalated. One night, Anthony woke up to find her missing from their bed. He walked down the hall and heard hushed voices coming from the study. "Why are you still with him?" a man's voice said through the speakerphone. "I told you I'm working on it," Madeline replied. "He's too pathetic to notice anything. Just a little longer, and I'll be out of here for good." Anthony's breath caught in his throat. He pushed the door open, and Madeline spun around, her face pale. "Who are you talking to?" he demanded, his voice trembling. "No one," she said, quickly ending the call. "It was just a work call." "Don't lie to me, Madeline," he said, stepping closer. "I heard everything." She crossed her arms, her expression hardening. "Fine. You want the truth? I'm done pretending. This marriage is a joke, Anthony. You're a joke. Her sudden shift stunned him, but what came next left him shattered. Hey, loser. You want to know who I've been with? She sneered. Let me make this easy for you. Listen carefully. It's Tiago, your perfect little brother. He has everything you don't. He promised me a massive share in the family business, and his Johnson is bigger. He satisfies me more. So, I'm moving into his luxury beach house with our kids tonight. Anthony's world tilted. Tiago, he whispered, his voice barely audible. Yes, Tiago, she said, her tone dripping with venom. And guess what? The kids? They're not yours either. They're his. The room spun around him, and he gripped the edge of the desk to steady himself. Why? Why would you do this? Because I'm tired of settling, she said coldly. You're weak, Anthony. A loser. I deserve better, and Tiago is better. For a moment, he couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. The woman he had loved, the woman he had built a life with, stood before him, tearing apart everything they had shared. Madeline tossed her hair and smirked. Oh, and don't bother calling your parents. They already know and support us. You think you can stop me? Please. Just pack your things and slink back to whatever sad little corner of your world you came from. I've upgraded. Finally, Anthony stared at her, his chest tight with anger and despair. You'll regret this, he said quietly, his voice steady despite the storm brewing inside him. She laughed. Regret? Please. You couldn't do anything even if you tried. Without another word, she walked past him, leaving him alone in the suffocating silence. But as Anthony stood there, the weight of betrayal settling on his shoulders, something inside him shifted. He wasn't defeated. Not yet. If they wanted to play dirty, he would play smarter. Anthony spent the next few days in a daze. The revelation of Madeline's affair with Tiago left him shattered, but he clung to hope that perhaps it was just a recent mistake. He couldn't bring himself to believe it had been going on for years. However, that hope was short-lived when he started piecing together subtle details he had overlooked in the past. One afternoon, Anthony visited his parents, desperate for guidance. He sat in the living room, twisting his wedding ring as his father scrolled through his phone, barely paying attention. Dad, Anthony began hesitantly. I need to talk to you. His father sighed and set his phone down. What is it now, Anthony? Is this about Madeline again? Yes, Anthony said, his voice trembling. I think she's been unfaithful. And with Tiago. For a moment, his father didn't react. Then, without looking at him, he said, So? What do you want me to do about it? Anthony blinked, stunned. You knew? His mother entered the room, holding a tray of tea. She placed it on the table and sat down, her expression unreadable. Of course we knew, she said flatly. You knew? Anthony repeated, his voice rising. And you didn't tell me? His father scoffed. Why would we? Madeline and Tiago are better suited for each other. You were just holding her back. Anthony stared at them, his chest tightening. You're my parents. How could you do this to me? Because you've always been weak, Anthony, his mother said, her tone cold. You don't have the ambition or drive that Tiago has. Madeline saw that too. It's not her fault she wanted more. Anthony rose from his chair, his hands shaking. You're defending them? You're my family. His father waved him off. Stop being so dramatic. Tiago has always been the golden child. He's the future of this family. It's time you accepted that. Anthony's head spun. His parents, his own flesh and blood, had betrayed him just as cruelly as Madeline and Tiago had. Later that evening, Anthony sat in his car, gripping the steering wheel. He replayed the conversation with his parents over and over in his mind, each word cutting deeper than the last. He needed answers, so he drove to Tiago's house. When he arrived, he saw Madeline's car parked in the driveway. The sight made his stomach churn, but he stepped out and rang the doorbell. Tiago opened the door, his expression smug. Well, look who decided to drop by. I need to talk to you, Anthony said, his voice firm. Tiago shrugged and stepped aside, letting him in. Madeline was sitting on the couch, a glass of wine in her hand. She didn't even bother to look surprised. What do you want now, Anthony? She asked, her tone dripping with disdain. I want the truth, Anthony said, standing in the center of the room. How long has this been going on? Tiago chuckled and poured himself a drink. Years, he said casually, as if discussing the weather. Anthony turned to Madeline. Is that true? She met his gaze, unflinching. Yes, ever since the second year of our marriage. Anthony's breath hitched. The second year? We've been married for 16 years, Madeline, and it's been the best 16 years of my life, Tiago said with a smirk, clinking his glass against Madeline's. Anthony ignored him. What about the kids? Are they mine? Madeline's silence was deafening. She exchanged a glance with Tiago before finally speaking. They're his, she said, her voice devoid of remorse. Anthony felt the ground beneath him shift. You lied to me. For years. You let me believe they were mine. Well, they needed a father figure, Madeline said with a shrug. And you were convenient. Tiago laughed. Come on, don't act so surprised. Did you really think she'd stay with someone like you when she could have me? Anthony clenched his fists, his anger boiling over. You're my brother, Tiago. How could you do this to me? Tiago stepped closer, his smirk widening. Because I could. You've always been second place, Anthony. In school, in business, and now in life. It's about time you realized that. Unable to take any more, Anthony stormed out of the house and drove aimlessly through the city. He eventually pulled over at a park and sat on a bench, his head in his hands. Everything he had built his life around, his marriage, his family, his children, had been a lie. As he sat there, his phone buzzed. It was a message from his mother. Stop creating unnecessary drama. Accept that Madeline is with Tiago now and move on. It's better for everyone. Anthony threw his phone onto the bench beside him. He felt like screaming, but the pain was too heavy to let out. The next morning, Anthony returned to his house, only to find Tiago and Madeline there, packing up their things. What are you doing here? Anthony demanded. Moving out, Madeline said nonchalantly. We're taking the kids and moving in with Tiago. You can't just take them, Anthony said, his voice shaking. They're not your kids, Tiago said, tossing a suitcase into the trunk of his car. So legally, you have no say. Anthony's hands trembled with rage. You won't get away with this. Get away with what? Madeline said, smirking. We've already gotten away with it, Anthony. You're too pathetic to do anything about it. Tiago laughed as he slammed the car trunk shut. Face it, you've lost. You were never going to win this game. Anthony stood frozen as they drove away, leaving him alone in the empty house. He felt hollow, like a shell of the man he used to be. But deep inside, something was stirring. It wasn't defeat. It wasn't despair. It was determination. If they thought he was powerless, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. Anthony sat alone in his dimly lit study, the soft hum of the ceiling fan filling the silence. His mind churned with a mixture of rage and clarity. The sting of betrayal from his wife, brother, and parents was still fresh, but it no longer paralyzed him. It had transformed into something far more potent: resolve. For years, they had played him for a fool. They thought he was weak, incapable of standing up for himself. They thought he'd quietly fade into the background while they laughed at his expense. But they underestimated him. I'll make them pay, he whispered to himself, his voice steady. Every last one of them. The next morning, Anthony began his plan. He started with the family business, the empire his father had built, but one Anthony had silently helped grow over the years. His role may have been behind the scenes, but he knew every detail of its operations. And, crucially, he knew its vulnerabilities. He met with Christian, an old college friend, and now a successful corporate lawyer, over coffee. Christian adjusted his glasses as he listened to Anthony recount the events of the past few weeks. They've taken everything from me, Christian, Anthony said, his tone calm but laced with fury. I won't let them walk away unscathed. Christian leaned forward. What exactly do you want to do? I want to take over the business. I own a majority of the shares, but I've never interfered because I trusted my father and Tiago to handle things. That trust is gone now. Christian nodded, tapping his pen against the table. If you hold the majority, you're in a strong position. But we need to tread carefully. Do you have access to the company's financial records? I have copies of everything, Anthony said, pulling a USB drive from his pocket. Years of transactions, deals, everything. If there's even a hint of mismanagement or fraud, I'll find it. Christian took the drive, a small smile tugging at his lips. Good. Let me analyze this. If Tiago or your father has been playing fast and loose with the company's finances, we can use that against them. Anthony nodded. And there's more. I need you to help me legally protect myself against Madeline. She's trying to take the kids, even though they're not mine. Christian's eyebrows shot up. Wait, they're not yours. They're Tiago's, Anthony said bitterly. Christian shook his head. Unbelievable. Don't worry, Anthony. We'll make sure she gets nothing. Over the next few weeks, Anthony quietly gathered evidence. He combed through years of financial records late into the night, his study filled with stacks of files and spreadsheets. What he found made his blood boil. Tiago had been siphoning money from the company, funneling it into offshore accounts, and funding a lavish lifestyle while masking it as business expenses. Even more damning, Anthony discovered that his father had been complicit, approving shady deals and turning a blind eye to Tiago's misconduct. They built their empire on lies, Anthony muttered, jotting down notes. Meanwhile, he began surveilling Madeline. With the help of a private investigator, he tracked her movements, collected phone records, and even retrieved incriminating photos of her and Tiago. The more evidence he gathered, the more determined he became. One evening, Anthony called Christian to discuss the progress. Christian, I have everything, Anthony said over the phone. Proof of Tiago's embezzlement, my father's involvement, and Madeline's affair. They've all dug their graves. Now it's time to make them fall into them. Christian's voice was calm, but excited. Good. I've gone through the financials you sent me, and you're right. There's enough here to open a criminal investigation. But we need to be smart about how we use it. If we expose them too early, they might have time to cover their tracks. I want to hit them where it hurts the most, Anthony said. I want to strip them of everything they care about. And the business? I'll take it over, Anthony said. They don't deserve to run it. I've already started buying up shares from silent stakeholders. Once I control the board, I'll force them out. Christian chuckled. You've thought this through? They destroyed my life, Anthony said coldly. I've had plenty of time to think. The next phase of the plan involved subtly sowing discord within the family. Anthony began leaking small pieces of information to trusted employees within the company. Whispers of Tiago's misconduct started spreading, creating tension in the office. At the same time, Anthony reached out to old friends in the business community, allies he had made over the years but rarely called upon. He shared just enough details to gain their support without revealing his full hand. One such meeting was with Mr. Roman, a veteran businessman who had known Anthony's father for decades. I always knew Tiago was trouble, Roman said, sipping his tea. Your father indulged him too much. If you're taking control of the company, you'll have my support. Thank you, sir, Anthony said. I won't let you down. Meanwhile, Madeline remained oblivious to Anthony's activities. She continued flaunting her new life with Tiago, posting pictures of their outings on social media and mocking Anthony indirectly through cryptic captions. One night, she sent him a text. You should move on, Anthony. It's pathetic how you're clinging to the past. Tiago and I are happy, and there's nothing you can do about it. Anthony stared at the message, his jaw tightening. He didn't respond. Instead, he saved the screenshot, adding it to the growing folder of evidence. As weeks turned into months, Anthony's plan neared completion. With Christian's help, he had built an airtight case against Tiago and his father. The documents detailing their financial fraud were ready to be submitted to the authorities. On the business front, Anthony had quietly gained control of 51% of the company's shares, giving him the power to oust both Tiago and his father from their positions. The final step was Madeline. Anthony filed a legal case to contest her claim to any marital assets, armed with evidence of her infidelity and financial misconduct. One evening, as he sat in his study finalizing the last details, Christian called. Anthony, everything's in place. Once we pull the trigger, there's no turning back. Are you ready? Anthony leaned back in his chair, a small, cold smile on his face. I've been ready for months. Let's finish this. The grand dining hall of the family mansion was filled with laughter and chatter as Tiago and Anthony's parents hosted a lavish gathering. The guests, a mix of business associates and family friends, mingled over glasses of wine and gourmet appetizers. Tiago and Madeline stood at the center of attention, basking in compliments about their relationship and success. Anthony walked in unnoticed, wearing a calm expression that masked the storm brewing within. He carried a laptop bag and a thick folder, each containing the weapons he needed to dismantle everything his so-called family had built on lies. Tiago caught sight of him and smirked. "Surprised to see you here," he said mockingly as Anthony approached. "I thought you'd be too busy sulking to show your face." Anthony met his brother's gaze evenly. "I wouldn't miss this for the world, Tiago. I have something special planned for tonight." Madeline glanced at him with disdain. "Why are you even here, Anthony? Haven't you embarrassed yourself enough?" Anthony ignored her, turning to the guests instead. He raised his voice so everyone could hear. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, silencing the room, "I apologize for interrupting your evening, but I have some urgent matters to share, matters concerning my family and this so-called empire you've all come to admire." Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd as Tiago's confident smile faltered. "Anthony, what are you doing?" he hissed, stepping closer. Anthony stepped back, holding up his hands. "Please, Tiago, let me finish. After all, this is about you, Madeline, and our dear parents." Anthony opened his laptop and connected it to a projector set up in the room. The first slide appeared on the wall, a series of bank statements showing massive amounts of money funneled into offshore accounts under Tiago's name. "This," Anthony said, his voice steady, "is the true face of your golden child. Tiago has been embezzling funds from the family business for years, funneling millions into secret accounts to fund his extravagant lifestyle." Gasps filled the room as Anthony flipped through the evidence. Falsified invoices, hidden transactions, and fake business expenses. "You're lying!" Tiago shouted, his face red. Anthony smirked. "Am I? Would you like to explain these documents? Or perhaps this email correspondence where you instructed an employee to destroy evidence?" Tiago lunged forward, but their father stepped in. "What is this nonsense, Anthony?" he demanded. "This isn't nonsense, Dad," Anthony said, turning to him. "You knew about this, didn't you? You approved those deals, covered for Tiago, and allowed him to loot the company. You both betrayed the shareholders and everyone who trusted you." The guests began whispering among themselves, their once friendly expressions turning judgmental. Anthony's mother tried to intervene, her voice shrill. "Stop this, Anthony. You're making a fool of yourself." Anthony chuckled bitterly. "Oh, I'm far from done, Mother." He clicked to the next slide, a series of photos and text messages between Madeline and Tiago, explicitly detailing their affair. "And here we have the lovebirds," Anthony said, his tone icy. "While I worked day and night to support my family, my wife and my brother were busy building their own little fantasy. Oh, and let's not forget the cherry on top. Those kids I've raised for years? They're not mine. They're Tiago's." A stunned silence fell over the room. Madeline's face turned pale, and she clutched Tiago's arm, her earlier smugness replaced with panic. "Anthony, stop it," she screamed. "Why?" Anthony shot back. "You didn't care about humiliating me when you flaunted your affair. You didn't think twice about betraying me or stealing years of my life." The crowd was now openly hostile toward Tiago, Madeline, and Anthony's parents. One guest, an influential investor, stepped forward. "Is this true?" he asked Tiago, his tone sharp. "Did you really embezzle funds from the company?" Tiago stammered, unable to form a coherent response. Anthony seized the moment. "I've already submitted this evidence to the authorities and the board of directors. As of now, Tiago and my father are being removed from their positions. The company's assets are frozen, and a full audit is underway." Anthony's father looked at him with fury. "You can't do this. This company is my legacy." "Correction," Anthony said coldly. "It was your legacy. Now it's mine. I've spent the last few months buying up shares. I'm the majority shareholder, which means I call the shots now." As the weight of Anthony's words sank in, Madeline's anger turned to desperation. She stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Anthony, please," she begged. "We can fix this. We made mistakes, but we can start over. The kids still need you." Anthony laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. The kids? You mean Tiago's kids? You used me as a pawn in your game, Madeline. You don't get to play the victim now. She fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. Please, Anthony, don't take everything from us. I'll do anything. Just forgive me. Anthony looked down at her, his expression cold. You're not sorry for what you did. You're sorry you got caught. I owe you nothing, Madeline. The fallout was swift. Within weeks, Tiago and Madeline's luxurious lifestyle crumbled. The house Tiago had purchased with stolen funds was foreclosed, and their assets were seized. They were forced to move into a dingy apartment far from the comforts they had once enjoyed. Madeline tried reaching out to Anthony several times, leaving tearful voicemails and sending messages begging for forgiveness. Anthony never responded. His parents fared no better. Ostracized by their social circle and shamed by the scandal, they found themselves alone and powerless. Anthony severed all ties with them, refusing to take their calls or acknowledge their existence. One evening, as Anthony walked through the empty halls of the company headquarters, he felt a sense of closure. The empire his family had built on lies was now under his control. He had turned their betrayal into his strength, and he had emerged victorious. As he stood by the window, looking out at the city skyline, his phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Madeline. Anthony, please. Just one chance to explain. I made a mistake, but I still love you. Anthony deleted the message without replying. For the first time in years, he felt free. Madeline sat alone in the dingy one-bedroom apartment she and Tiago now shared. The peeling paint on the walls and the faint smell of mildew were a far cry from the luxury beach house she had once flaunted. A single bulb flickered above her as she stared at her phone, scrolling through photos of the life she had lost, designer clothes, lavish parties, and vacations that felt like a lifetime ago. Her finger hovered over Anthony's contact, her heart pounding. She had already sent him dozens of messages, some angry, others desperate. None had been answered. Swallowing her pride, she dialed his number once again. The phone rang for what felt like an eternity before going to voicemail. Madeline sat alone in the dingy one-bedroom apartment she and Tiago now shared. The peeling paint on the walls and the faint smell of mildew were a far cry from the luxury beach house she had once flaunted. A single bulb flickered above her as she stared at her phone, scrolling through photos of the life she had lost, designer clothes, lavish parties, and vacations that felt like a lifetime ago. Her finger hovered over Anthony's contact, her heart pounding. She had already sent him dozens of messages, some angry, others desperate. None had been answered. Swallowing her pride, she dialed his number once again. The phone rang for what felt like an eternity before going to voicemail. Anthony, please, she began, her voice trembling. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm begging you. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake. I was selfish, and I let greed blind me. Please, if there's any part of you that still cares, give me a chance to make things right. She paused, fighting back tears. The kids, they miss you. They don't understand what's happening. I know they're not yours, but you've always been their father in every way that matters. Please, Anthony, for them if not for me. The line went dead, and Madeline buried her face in her hands, sobbing. She had once believed she was untouchable, that leaving Anthony for Tiago would elevate her life. But now, everything had crumbled. In the other room, Tiago sat on a tattered couch, nursing a cheap bottle of whiskey. His once pristine appearance was gone, his beard was unkempt, his hair greasy. He stared blankly at the TV, which flickered with static because they couldn't afford cable anymore. You're crying again, he called out, his voice slurred. Madeline wiped her tears and walked into the living room. I was trying to call Anthony. Maybe if Tiago scoffed, cutting her off. Anthony? You think he's going to help us? He's the one who put us here, Madeline. Or have you forgotten? She glared at him. We're here because of you, Tiago. You're the one who stole from the company. You're the one who promised me a life you couldn't deliver. Tiago slammed the bottle down on the table, his face twisted with anger. Don't you dare put this all on me. You were more than happy to leave Anthony when you thought I had money. You wanted this just as much as I did. Madeline flinched but didn't back down. At least Anthony treated me with respect. He loved me. What have you done except ruin everything? Tiago laughed bitterly. Oh, now you remember how good Anthony was? Where was this appreciation when you were sneaking around behind his back? Their shouting match escalated, the tension in the small apartment suffocating. Madeline stormed out, slamming the door behind her. She needed air, needed to escape the oppressive reality of her new life. The next day, Madeline showed up at Anthony's office unannounced. She waited in the lobby, her hands clasped nervously in her lap as the receptionist informed Anthony of her arrival. When Anthony finally appeared, his expression was unreadable. He was dressed sharply in a tailored suit, exuding the confidence and control she had once taken for granted. "What are you doing here, Madeline?" he asked, his tone devoid of warmth. Madeline stood, her voice trembling. "I need to talk to you. Please, just give me 5 minutes." He gestured for her to follow him into a conference room, closing the door behind them. He crossed his arms and leaned against the table, waiting for her to speak. "Anthony," she began, her voice breaking. "I know I hurt you. I know I betrayed you in the worst possible way. But I'm here to ask, no, beg for your forgiveness. I was selfish and stupid. I thought I was upgrading my life, but I was wrong. I see that now." Anthony stared at her, his expression cold. "You didn't just hurt me, Madeline. You destroyed everything I thought I knew about my life. You made a fool of me. You and Tiago, along with my parents, treated me like I was nothing. And now you want forgiveness?" Tears streamed down her face. "I was wrong, Anthony. I see that now. I was blinded by greed and stupidity. I thought Tiago could give me what you couldn't, but he's not you. He never was." Anthony let out a bitter laugh. "You think that matters now? You think a few tears and an apology can erase years of betrayal? You made your choice, Madeline. You picked Tiago, and now you can live with the consequences." She dropped to her knees, clasping her hands together. "Please, Anthony, I'm begging you. If not for me, then for the kids. They need you. They miss you." He stepped back, his jaw tightening. "The kids? The ones you lied to me about for years? The ones you let me believe were mine while you played house with my brother? Don't you dare use them to manipulate me." Madeline sobbed uncontrollably. "I'll do anything, Anthony. Just tell me what to do. I'll leave Tiago. I'll make things right." Anthony shook his head, his voice steely. "There's no making this right, Madeline. You didn't just betray me. You betrayed everything we built together. And now you're paying the price." As Madeline left the office, her heart felt like it was shattering into a million pieces. She had come hoping for even a sliver of kindness, but all she found was the cold, unyielding reality of her actions. When she returned home, she found Tiago passed out on the couch, the empty whiskey bottle on the floor. The sight filled her with a mix of anger and despair. This was the man she had chosen over Anthony, a man who had promised her the world but left her with nothing. She shook him awake, her frustration boiling over. "Get up, Tiago. Do something. We can't live like this." Tiago groaned, swatting her hand away. "What do you want me to do, Madeline? Go beg Anthony for a handout." "Maybe you should," she snapped, "because I can't keep living like this." "I won't." Tiago sat up, his eyes bloodshot. "You think he'll help us? After everything we did? You're delusional." Their argument devolved into more shouting, but this time, Madeline didn't cry. She was too numb, too drained to feel anything anymore. Over the next few weeks, their relationship deteriorated further. Tiago's drinking worsened, and Madeline withdrew into herself. She stopped calling Anthony, realizing it was pointless. She had lost him, just as she had lost everything else. Late one night, as she lay awake in the dark, she whispered to herself, "What have I done?" The silence offered no answers, only the weight of her choices. Anthony stood in his new apartment, a minimalist yet comfortable space he had chosen to begin his life anew. The large windows overlooked the city skyline, and for the first time in years, he felt at peace. He had cut ties with his toxic family, reclaimed his dignity, and now he was free to focus on himself. As he unpacked a dusty old box labeled personal, his hand brushed against a worn sketchbook. He pulled it out, flipping through the pages. The sight of his old pencil sketches, portraits, landscapes, and abstract concepts tugged at something deep inside him. "I used to love this," he murmured, running his fingers over a half-finished drawing of a forest. The memory of why he stopped came rushing back. It had been Madeline. She had once scoffed at his sketches, dismissing them as a waste of time. Over the years, he had let her words sink in, gradually pushing his passion aside. Anthony placed the sketchbook on the table and made a decision. The next day, Anthony walked into an art supply store for the first time in a decade. The faint smell of paint and fresh canvas filled the air. He browsed the aisles, feeling an odd mix of nostalgia and excitement as he picked up brushes, tubes of paint, and a blank canvas. As he placed his items on the counter, the cashier, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, smiled at him. "Starting fresh?" Anthony nodded. "You could say that." "Good," she said. "It's never too late to return to what you love." Back in his apartment, Anthony set up a small art corner near the window. For hours, he painted, hesitant at first, but gradually finding his rhythm. He lost himself in the strokes, the colors blending together to form a vibrant sunset over a hill. It wasn't perfect, but it didn't need to be. By the time he stepped back to admire his work, the sun outside had set, and the room was bathed in a soft glow. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of accomplishment that had nothing to do with money or revenge. A few weeks later, Anthony met up with an old friend, Autumn, at a cozy cafe. They hadn't seen each other in years, but Autumn's infectious energy was the same as ever. "I couldn't believe it when you called," Autumn said, sipping his coffee. "What's it been? 10 years?" "More or less," Anthony replied. "I figured it was time to reconnect. I've been clearing out my life." Autumn raised an eyebrow. "I heard bits and pieces about what happened. I'm sorry, man. That must have been rough." "It was," Anthony admitted. "But honestly, it was also a wake-up call. I let myself get lost in other people's expectations for too long. Now I'm focusing on me." "That's the spirit." Autumn grinned. "So what's next?" Anthony hesitated before answering. "I'm painting again." Autumn's eyes widened. "No way. You were brilliant back in college. You still got it?" "I'm working on it," Anthony said with a small smile. "But it feels good to create again. Well, let me know when you're ready to showcase. I've got some contacts in the art world." It was at a local art exhibition, encouraged by Autumn, that Anthony met Haley. She was standing in front of one of his paintings, a vibrant depiction of a stormy sea, reflecting the turbulence he had felt during the worst days of his life. "This is incredible," she said, unaware that the artist was standing right beside her. "Thank you," Anthony replied. She turned to him, surprised. "Oh, you're the artist?" "I am," he said, extending his hand. "Anthony." "Haley." She shook his hand, her grip firm and confident. "You've captured something raw here. The colors, the chaos, it's like I can feel the storm." Anthony smiled. "That's what I was going for." They talked for a while, their conversation flowing effortlessly. Haley was a writer, working on her first novel, and she shared Anthony's love for creative expression. "So, what made you pick up painting again?" she asked. Anthony hesitated, unsure of how much to share. "Let's just say I needed a way to process some things. Painting helped me rediscover myself." Haley nodded, as if she understood more than he was saying. "Art has a way of doing that, doesn't it? It forces you to confront yourself, even the parts you'd rather ignore." Their connection deepened over the next few months. They started meeting regularly, at cafes, art galleries, and parks, sharing stories about their pasts, their dreams, and their struggles. Haley was unlike anyone Anthony had ever met. She didn't judge him for his scars. Instead, she saw them as part of what made him who he was. One evening, as they sat on a bench overlooking a serene lake, Haley asked, "Do you ever think about forgiving them? Your ex-wife? Your family?" Anthony stared at the water, the moonlight reflecting off its surface. "I've thought about it," he admitted. "But forgiveness isn't for them. It's for me. Holding on to anger only keeps me tied to the past. I'm not there yet, but maybe someday." Haley placed a hand on his. "That's brave of you, Anthony. Letting go is the hardest thing to do." He looked at her, a warmth spreading through his chest. "Meeting you has made it easier. You've reminded me what it feels like to trust someone again. She smiled, her eyes soft. And you've reminded me what it feels like to dream without fear. As their relationship blossomed, Anthony found himself growing in ways he hadn't thought possible. He hosted his first solo art exhibition, with Haley by his side, and the response was overwhelming. People praised his work, but more than that, they connected with the emotion behind it. One critic wrote, "Anthony's art tells a story of pain, resilience, and transformation. It's not just a journey of colors, but of the soul." One evening, as he and Haley walked hand in hand through a quiet street, Anthony stopped and turned to her. "You've changed my life, Haley," he said, his voice steady. "You've shown me that there's beauty in rebuilding, in trusting again. I don't know where this journey will take us, but I want you to be part of it." Haley smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "I'm not going anywhere, Anthony. This journey is ours now." For the first time in years, Anthony felt whole. He had faced betrayal, loss, and heartbreak, but from the ashes of his old life, he had built something new, something better. Anthony sat at his desk, overlooking the city from his sleek, modern office. The past year had been transformative. His art career was thriving, with galleries eager to showcase his work. He was also making headway as a silent investor in multiple startups, diversifying his income. Yet, despite his newfound success, Anthony felt the most fulfillment in his growing relationship with Haley. "I don't know where this journey will take us, but I want you to be part of it." Haley smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "I'm not going anywhere, Anthony. This journey is ours now." For the first time in years, Anthony felt whole. He had faced betrayal, loss, and heartbreak, but from the ashes of his old life, he had built something new, something better. Anthony sat at his desk, overlooking the city from his sleek, modern office. The past year had been transformative. His art career was thriving, with galleries eager to showcase his work. He was also making headway as a silent investor in multiple startups, diversifying his income. Yet, despite his newfound success, Anthony felt the most fulfillment in his growing relationship with Haley. Haley had become his anchor, a partner who supported him without smothering him, someone who celebrated his victories and stood by him in moments of doubt. They shared a quiet understanding, built on respect and trust. One afternoon, as Anthony wrapped up a video call with a potential business partner, his assistant walked in holding an envelope. "This came for you, sir." "Hand-delivered," she said, placing it on the desk. Anthony frowned, taking the envelope. There was no return address. Only his name, scrawled across the front in a handwriting he recognized immediately. "Madeline." He hesitated before opening it, unsure of what to expect. Unfolding the letter, he began to read, "Dear Anthony, I don't deserve your time, but I'm writing this because I have no one else to turn to. Life has been unbearable. Tiago and I are barely speaking anymore, and every day feels like a punishment I brought upon myself. I know I wronged you in ways I can never make up for. I see that now, too late, I know. But I need to talk to you, face to face. I need closure, and I hope you do too. Please meet me one last time. You don't owe me anything, but I'm begging for a chance to apologize properly. I'll be at the cafe near your old apartment tomorrow at 4 p.m. If you don't come, I'll understand." Madeline. Anthony read the letter twice, his emotions a strange mix of indifference and curiosity. He placed the letter back on his desk and leaned back in his chair, staring out the window. "Do I even want to see her?" he muttered to himself. Later that evening, he shared the letter with Haley. "What do you think?" he asked as they sat on the couch in his living room. Haley tilted her head thoughtfully. "It's your decision, Anthony. If you think seeing her will help you move forward, then go. But don't do it for her. Do it for yourself." He nodded. "I'm not sure if I even feel anything for her anymore. That chapter of my life feels so far away." "Then maybe this meeting will confirm that," Haley said gently. "Sometimes, facing the past is the only way to truly leave it behind." The next day at 4 p.m., Anthony arrived at the cafe. The place brought back a flood of memories. He and Madeline had frequented it in the early days of their marriage. Back then, life had felt simple, filled with shared laughter and dreams. He spotted Madeline sitting at a corner table, her once confident demeanor replaced by nervousness. She looked older, tired, and worn down by the life she had chosen. Anthony walked over, and she looked up, startled. "You came," she said, her voice shaky. "I did," he replied evenly, sitting down across from her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Madeline fidgeted with the edge of her scarf, avoiding his gaze. "You said you wanted to talk," Anthony prompted, breaking the silence. She looked up, her eyes glistening with tears. "I don't even know where to start." "Start with why I'm here," he said, his tone firm but not unkind. Madeline took a deep breath. "I've lost everything, Anthony. The life I thought I wanted, it's gone. Tiago blames me for everything. He drinks all the time, and we barely speak. The kids, they resent both of us. And your parents? My parents?" Anthony interrupted, raising an eyebrow. "They're miserable, disowned by you, ostracized by their friends. They live in complete isolation now." Anthony leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "Sounds like the consequences of their actions." Madeline flinched but didn't argue. "I know. We all deserved it. But I can't stop thinking about what I did to you. I destroyed everything good in my life because I was greedy and stupid. And now, I'm paying the price." Anthony remained silent, letting her words hang in the air. "I need you to know," she continued, her voice breaking, "that I regret everything. Leaving you, betraying you, it's the worst mistake I've ever made. You were a good man, Anthony, better than I ever deserved." He looked at her, his expression cold. "Do you expect me to forgive you, Madeline? To tell you that it's okay, that we can wipe the slate clean?" "No," she said quickly, shaking her head. "I don't deserve your forgiveness. I just needed to say I'm sorry. Truly sorry. Not for me, but for you. You didn't deserve what I did to you." Anthony studied her for a moment. "You're right. I didn't deserve it. I gave you everything I had, and you threw it away for a fantasy that fell apart the moment reality set in. And now, you're here, asking for closure. But Madeline, closure doesn't come from me. It comes from you facing the consequences of your choices." Tears streamed down her face, but Anthony didn't waver. "Do you even realize how much damage you caused?" he continued. "Not just to me, but to yourself, to the kids, to everything we built together. And now you sit here, expecting, what? Redemption? I don't know," she whispered. "I just needed you to hear me out, to know that I'm not that person anymore." Anthony sighed and stood up. "People don't change because they want forgiveness, Madeline. They change because they realize they have to. I hope you find peace, but don't look for it from me." Madeline's sobs grew louder, but Anthony walked away without looking back. Later that evening, Anthony recounted the encounter to Haley as they prepared dinner together. "How do you feel now?" she asked, chopping vegetables while he stirred a pot of soup. "Lighter," he admitted. "It's strange. Hearing her admit her mistakes didn't bring me satisfaction. If anything, it just reminded me how far I've come." Haley smiled. "That's because you've grown, Anthony. You're not the same person she betrayed. You've built a new life, one that doesn't revolve around her or anyone else." He reached out, taking her hand. "And that life is better because of you." Haley's cheeks flushed, but she smiled warmly. "You did this for yourself, Anthony. I'm just lucky to be part of your journey." As they sat down to eat, Anthony felt an overwhelming sense of peace. He had faced his past, confronted his pain, and come out stronger. For the first time in years, the future felt bright, unburdened by the shadows of betrayal. The morning sunlight streamed through the windows of Anthony's art studio, casting golden rays over the paintings that lined the walls. He stood at the easel, finishing the final touches on a large canvas depicting a phoenix rising from the ashes. The strokes were bold, almost defiant, a reflection of his journey from ruin to renewal. Haley entered quietly, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. "Another masterpiece?" she asked, setting one mug down on a nearby table. Anthony smiled and stepped back to admire his work. "It's not just a painting. It's a reminder. A reminder of what? That no matter how badly someone tries to burn you down, you can always rebuild. Stronger, better?" Haley studied the painting, then him. "I think you've done that, Anthony. More than anyone I've ever known." He placed a hand on her shoulder. "I couldn't have done it alone." They stood in silence for a moment, taking into work together. But even as Anthony basked in this sense of completion, a small voice in his mind reflected on the journey that had brought him here. Later that afternoon, Anthony sat on a park bench with Haley, watching children play in the distance. The serenity of the moment felt earned, a stark contrast to the chaos of his life not so long ago. "I think it's finally over," Anthony said quietly, almost to himself. Haley turned to him. "What is?" "The anger, the bitterness. For so long, I let it consume me. I thought revenge would be the end of it, but it was just the beginning of something else. Something better," Haley added. He nodded. "It wasn't the revenge that freed me. It was choosing to live again, to love again." Haley smiled and leaned into him. "And you've done that beautifully." As they sat there, Anthony noticed a familiar figure in the distance. Madeline stood under a tree, partially obscured by shadows. Her once pristine appearance had given way to a disheveled look. She seemed thinner, older, and worn down by the life she had chosen. Her gaze met his briefly, and even from a distance, Anthony could see the regret in her eyes. She didn't approach, didn't call out to him. She simply watched. "Is that her?" Haley asked softly, following his line of sight. "It is," Anthony said, his tone neutral. "She looks lost." "She made her choices," he replied. "And I made mine. That's all there is to it." Haley hesitated before asking, "Do you pity her?" Anthony considered the question carefully. "I don't know if pity is the right word. I think she's paying the price for her actions, just like I had to pay mine. The difference is I chose to move forward. She's still stuck in the past." They sat in silence for a moment, the wind rustling the leaves around them. Anthony turned back to Haley and smiled. "Let's go. There's no point dwelling on what's behind us." That evening, Anthony and Haley hosted a small gathering at their apartment. Autumn was the first to arrive, carrying a bottle of wine. "You two are like the poster couple for a fresh start," Autumn said, grinning as he poured himself a drink. "I'm telling you, Anthony, your story could inspire a movie." Anthony chuckled. "Only if someone wants a long, messy drama with a decent ending." "Hey, people love redemption arcs," Autumn quipped. As the night went on, the small group of friends laughed, shared stories, and celebrated life. Anthony looked around the room, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. These were the people who mattered now, those who had stood by him, those who had seen his scars and admired the way he'd healed. A week later, Anthony attended a charity art auction where one of his pieces was being showcased. It was a large event, attended by prominent figures in the art and business communities. As he mingled with the crowd, a voice stopped him in his tracks. "Anthony?" He turned to see his parents standing awkwardly near the entrance. They looked out of place, their once polished demeanor replaced by visible discomfort. "We didn't know you'd be here," his father said, his tone cautious. Anthony regarded them coolly. "This is my painting being auctioned. Why are you here?" "We heard about it and thought, maybe we could see you. Talk to you," his mother said, her voice trembling. Anthony folded his arms. "Talk about what? The years of lies? The betrayal? Or how you let greed destroy our family?" His mother's eyes welled up. "We made mistakes, Anthony. Terrible ones. But we've paid the price. Please, just consider giving us a chance to make things right." Anthony sighed, his tone calm but firm. "You had your chance. For years, I trusted you, and you threw it away. I don't owe you forgiveness, and I'm not interested in rebuilding what you destroyed." His father started to speak, but Anthony raised a hand to stop him. "If you came here looking for absolution, you're wasting your time. Move on." "I have." Without waiting for a response, he turned and walked away. Back home that night, Anthony recounted the encounter to Haley as they sat on the balcony overlooking the city. "Do you think you'll ever forgive them?" she asked. "Maybe one day," Anthony admitted. "But forgiveness doesn't mean letting them back into my life. It's about freeing myself from the weight of their actions. For now, I'm just focused on living." Haley leaned her head on his shoulder. "And you're doing an incredible job of it." The next morning, Anthony went for a jog in the park. As he ran, he felt a strange sense of clarity, as though the lingering shadows of his past were finally lifting. He stopped by a fountain, splashing water on his face, and noticed a family playing nearby, a father, a mother, and 2 young children. For a brief moment, a pang of sadness hit him. He had once envisioned a life like that with Madeline. But the sadness didn't linger. He realized that while his past hadn't turned out the way he'd hoped, his future held possibilities he hadn't even dreamed of yet. As he jogged back home, he spotted Haley waiting for him on the balcony, waving with a smile that lit up his world. Anthony smiled back, his heart full. Betrayal had broken him once, but he had rebuilt himself piece by piece. Revenge had given him closure, but it was love, trust, and resilience that had truly set him free. Taking Haley's hand as he walked inside, Anthony knew one thing for certain: his past would never define him again. From a distance, unseen by Anthony, Madeline watched from the shadows of a nearby street. Her shoulders slumped, her eyes filled with regret. But as Anthony disappeared into his home, she knew that she no longer had a place in his life. And for Anthony, that chapter was finally closed.